Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm joined by Jason Pritchard. Jason shares a ton of knowledge, what he's learned over the past 12 years in real estate investment, leadership lessons, marketing lessons, a lot of the things I went right and wrong as he was scaling his real estate wholesaling and fix and flip company. I'll see you there. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Brandon, what's up, man? Thanks for having me on, dude. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to take what I can learn
Yeah.
from you and your experience in this industry. For anybody who doesn't know who you are, Jason, give me the backstory. Where'd you come
Yeah.
from? What are you doing?
Yeah. I'll give you the condensed version of how I got started. So my name is Jason Pritchard. Own a company called Pinnacle Home Buyers, as well as a land development company called Pinnacle Land Company. Started in our main market where I've grown up, Fresno, California, which for those of people that are unfamiliar with the state of California, we are smack dab in the middle and we go 2-3 hours in any direction. So I think a lot of times people think about California and they think about the Bay Area or LA and really big price points. And I think what's unique
Mhm.
about where we do business in the Central Valley is we're much closer to, your typical prices that you see like in the Midwest and the Southeast. And so we're one of the last affordable parts of the state, which I think makes me really bullish about, where we do business, because I still feel like there's opportunity to grow with both of our companies. Like I said, I started in 2014. Prior to that, I worked in corporate America for 15 years. I went down the traditional path that I think a lot of us go down, and we're sold, go to school, go to college, graduate, get a good job. And I was fortunate that I ended up getting into, an outside sales position early on. So I cut my teeth at these companies that I worked at in sales and sales management and commission performance-based compensation plans. And that was probably my biggest advantage, like coming into real estate, is that I had worked in that type of environment for a really long time. And so, I went through, this 15-year trajectory where, I thought I was going to climb the corporate ladder. I was going to work my way up into like management and, make, 3, 4, 500 grand a year and just kind of live that life. And I found myself in a place in my early 30s where I was really unhappy with my life. I was unhappy with, the trajectory of my career. A lot of that was rippling out into my marriage and my relationship with my kids. And, I'd always been intrigued by the idea of real estate investing, but lots of different reasons I never did it. And, finally in 2014, we burned all the boats. I had a spouse that was really supportive and, let me just, follow my dream and my passion. And, it's been a wild ride since then. We just started out fixing and flipping. And then we leveraged that into growing a pretty substantial rental portfolio here in Central California. And then, as my team and I've matured as a business and business owner, we started to take on some larger projects. And now we're doing some pretty big land development deals in Central California. So it's been a wild ride, man. A lot of fun.
Yeah, very, very cool. I can say from personal experience that I think supportive spouses are underrated.
It's
Behind
yeah,
every
dude. It
successful
isn't
business.
going to work if you don't have a supportive spouse. I talk about
Oh
that
my
a lot.
goodness.
Yeah, I mean, my wife believed in me more than I believed in myself at the beginning. Plus, she was willing to say, to me, Jason, with no real estate experience, no construction background, you can barely fix anything in our house. Go ahead and take a second mortgage out on our property, max out all the credit cards. You can cash in your 401k. And she let me do it. She gave me a year at the beginning. She's like, you got a year to figure this out, or you can go back and just, get a regular job. And I'm the kind of person that operates well without a safety net. And so when pressure's on, I typically rise to the occasion. I don't recommend that for most people, honestly, but I'm the kind of person that I think I needed to actually quit and operate without that safety net to feel like my back against the wall to be able to rise to the occasion and perform. And so, that's what worked for me. And it paid off, man. It's been, like I said, it's been a fun ride over the last 11, 12 years.
Yeah, good for you. That's a lot of fun. One thing I want to dig into a little bit here. This is like maybe a big tangent from
Yeah.
possibly the whole rest of this podcast. But you talk about how you're so unhappy in corporate America. You do your own thing, jump into real estate investment. But you also talk about how you have a team right now,
Yeah.
right? And this is sort of interesting. I'm always curious to hear this because I come from an unusual background. I had no work experience before I started this company. So I never had the job that I hated where I was like, I have to get away from this and I have to go launch this thing. So I don't always understand exactly how that goes. What I've heard from some entrepreneurs is they're like, oh yeah, you should never get a job. You should never do all this kind of stuff. And then they have employees.
Yeah.
Like, how do you justify like feeling that way about work? Yeah. Also hiring people. It's a really hard like worldview to scale a company with.
It is.
So
And I mean, honestly, the experience that I had in those 15 years working for those two large companies, I learned more than that by like a magnitude of, I don't even know how much when you compare it to like what I learned in school. And it was that real world application of, I had a sales team of 30 people when we were at our biggest, and it was all up and down multiple locations, all up and down the state. So you have to learn about, hiring process, building culture. How do you motivate and push buttons? How do you train people? How do you do all of these things that, a lot of people that have kind of like that hustle and that grind and are willing to just jump in and can be good solopreneurs or good with small teams, when they go to transition and maybe scale into having something that looks and feels a little bit more corporate, they struggle because they've never been in that environment before. And so for me, I'm not a believer in just like, hey, just start as an entrepreneur with no experience. I think for me, like I said at the beginning, that experience that I had, even though there was lots of aspects of it that I didn't like, it was the most valuable like training ground for me. And I think that was what helped give me what I have now today to kind of navigate a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with in a really kind of wonky and challenging real estate market. So it's been overall a very good learning lesson from corporate America.
Oh, absolutely. If I knew anything about business when I had started this company, it would have been so much easier. It would have been so much faster. I'm sure I'd be in a completely different place right now.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there's something to that. I'm also really curious to ask Jason, what do you do now in how you manage your company and how you lead your team that you feel is unique and different than it would have been if you didn't have that corporate experience behind you?
We're back now.
We're back. Yep.
I don't know what happened, dude. I'm at my office, so I feel like the Wi-Fi is pretty good over here. I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if you want to edit and then just jump back into the same thing.
Yeah. What's the
Okay,
last
cool.
thing? What's the last thing I said that you heard?
It froze on my end after I started talking about like the experience, the valuable experience in corporate America. And then I stopped and then you started going and then it froze. So I
Okay,
don't
so
know.
I'll just say
Yeah.
that again. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So what I'm curious about, Jason, is so you had that bad experience in corporate America. A lot of people I know that had that bad experience, those negative feelings associated with it. Of course, you look back on it and you say, that's where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned all these lessons that are really valuable for how I run my business. That's great. But I'm really curious if there's anything that you've taken out of that about how you treat your team today that's just different, where you say, like, as a leader, as a company, I'm going to be this way, not that way, because I've experienced being on the other side of a company being
Yeah.
that way before, and
Yeah.
it's just not worth it.
That's a really good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I try to walk a really fine line between always putting the best interests of the company ahead of everybody else. And that can put you in a position as a business owner where you have to be kind of cold and calculated and methodical about performance and all of these other things. But I do think I do a really good job of balancing with being fair and generous with the things that, in my experience in my old corporate job, they would just turn their back on you if something bad happened. You know what I mean? And so I really just genuinely care about the employees in the way, that would be the way that I would describe it. I care about my team and my employees in a way that I never felt in corporate America. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times when you're in management, your hands are kind of tied because you have initiatives and directives from your higher ups, you know what I mean? And you've got to execute on that. And you don't really have any margin or wiggle room for error to kind of make your own decision. And for me as a business owner, if something happens with my team member, we don't have to be just as cut and dry with certain things, man. And so I think we try to balance the structure and the systematic, like structural approach that works really well and allows company to scale. That's what I got out of corporate America. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing on top of still being a small family-owned business that really does care about their employees, invest into their team members and that type of thing. And walking that line for me, I think has been the thing where I took the best out of corporate America, but still have kind of that family-owned business. That's the kind of the way that I would describe it right now. And it works well for us. And I think it works well for our team members too.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's fantastic. There's very little people won't do for you if they feel like you actually really genuinely care about them.
That's absolutely right,
I've
man.
seen
And I
that.
think, compensation financially is important, but I've felt like when you really care as a business owner about the growth and the trajectory of that person, both personally and professionally, and you constantly think about how do I cast a vision as a business owner that can fit not only all of my hopes and dreams, but all of my team members in there too. And when that actually trickles down and they feel like you're authentic and genuine about that, people will run through a wall for you, man. And I think that's the kind of environment that we want to have here at our team. You know what I mean? And so, especially right now, dude, like the market right now is challenging. And so I think when you're dealing with stuff like this, it's great when everybody's printing money and everything is fine and, you know, everybody's paid and taking trips and doing all the cool stuff. But now, especially, that foundation and that culture is really important.
One of my favorite quotes about this is, someone, I can't remember which person said it, somebody with the last name Covey. What's in your heart oozes out.
Yeah.
You know, because it's funny because I see a lot of people, myself included, years ago, when trying to purchase things, like, oh, people just have to feel like I care about them.
Yeah.
But you know, the easiest way to do that is like honestly, that's what changed for me, is I actually had to start focusing on how do I make sure I care about people more. And if that's where my heart is, then that's what they're going to feel at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Like that,
Yeah.
that's what
And a good leader knows that everybody, the way that you express that is going to be different for every single team member. You know, we've got, you know, between virtual team members and stateside employees, 13 people that work for the company now, and every single one of them have different, you know, I say buttons to push, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like there's just different things that get people out of bed to motivate them, that they care about, to show them that you care as a business owner. And your job is, like you said, to figure out like what gets your team members to tick on an individual level. And then as you insulate yourself a little bit as a business owner and you hire management, like how do you get the leadership team? How does that trickle down to them? And how do you download that into them so then they can still do the same thing? So there doesn't feel like there's a disconnect, because I don't get as much face time with Jason anymore. I have a new direct report, right? How do you get that to kind of trickle down still? And so, you know, we're in the process of, you know, building out the team and learning a lot of these lessons right now. And so, you know, it's been a, you know, we've spent more time building the quote unquote business and like that type of stuff the last 2-3 years than we have anything else. And I think it's fortified us in a way that I think has helped us really navigate a lot of the stuff that's going on. And I think it's setting us up for a positive and a bright future.
Yeah, that's cool. One of the, I feel like for me, I'm curious if your experience is the same. One of the things that I feel has made a big difference for me, probably over the past like 18 months or so, is just adopting this mindset that I always knew existed, and it always sounded kind of cheesy, but I actually understand it now.
Yeah.
I feel like better. And it's basically, I mean, we just call it super simply internally, the win-win-win mindset. Like every single move that you have to make has to be a win for the client, in our case, a win for the employee, and a win for the company.
I believe it. Yeah, absolutely.
And
I love that.
It's crazy because oftentimes we're making decisions and the reason they're hard is like, oh, well, it's a loss for, this one's a loss for the company, but it's a win for the employees, or this one's a win for the company, but it's going to suck for the employees. Like, it sounds like there was a lot of that kind of stuff at corporate America. And
that's a great way to put a bow on the question that you were talking about, right? I think in corporate America, it was the win for the company first, at least a lot of my experience. And if the employee won or the customer won, then great. But it was always the company first, right? And I left with a really sour taste in my mouth because of lots of instances like that. So finding the balance where all three can win, I think is a really, really good way to put it.
And honestly, not even just the balance. I guess what I found a lot is like when I really think about it, for example, we were just had this same conversation as a company about insurance costs.
Yep.
Which has been getting insane, right? And we're looking at it as like, okay, well, does the company win and we just, keep more money, or do we pay out more to help our employees with insurance?
Yeah.
And the more we thought about it, the more we sliced and diced it different ways. And we actually found a way that it's better for the company, and it's better for the employees, and it's better for the clients. And I guess what I'm saying is I firmly believe that almost everything can be done in such a way that's better for all parties, especially if you take into account that like performance can go up, or like, oh, well, if we could get this level of performance, then it would actually make sense because then the company would be compensated with those things. Like if you're looking at things like, if you look at people as like flexible learning, molding people, and you're looking at the company as like a flexible, growing, capable company, it's wild how so often if you look at it without creativity, without the discipline of making sure it's a win across the board, you're accepting a loss. And a lot of people think when they talk about like caring for your employees, they think it means like making a loss for the company that's a win for the employees. And in my experience, the more I've cared about the companies, actually the employees, actually the better the company has performed.
I agree. And I think a lot of times that decision-making process requires more effort, more thought, more output from us as a business owner. Because usually the easy answer for the company is the simplest one that requires the least amount of effort, but taking the time, both you as the business owner and your leadership team, to really say, look, no, we can figure out a way where there's synergy between all of these things. That's the type of stuff that does really trickle down and shows that it cares. And, it's interesting, like when you first get started in this business, you listen to like the Bigger Pockets and all of the podcasts to really learn. And now I spend so much more time like listening to founders and other things about how to actually grow a business. You know what I mean? And like, what do people that are founders and high level CEOs, like how do they creatively solve these problems, right? And looking at problems like that as opportunities to make the business more efficient and more valuable versus just making the easy decision to try to cut cost and, pad the bottom line type of thing, man. So it's definitely interesting to see the evolution that we've gone through when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yes, very, very wild. Let's talk. So this podcast, more people than not are listening for marketing information.
Yeah.
Just that we talked about so far is also really fascinating. One thing I respect about you, Jason, is that you've been in the game for a while.
Yeah.
And look, in a lot of fields, to find someone who's been in the game for 12 years, really easy, right? You might be on like the shorter end of time frame in a lot of fields. In this field of like direct to seller real estate investment, you're a veteran, right?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
people. And similarly, that's like me in digital marketing, where it's like, well, it changes every 3 years anyways. So those people who've been in the industry for 20 years don't necessarily know more than people who've been in the industry for 5 years.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we're both in kind of these like evolving, quickly moving industries where things are a little different. One big thing being direct to seller marketing wasn't really a main channel for investors until pretty recently. And
Yeah.
and you were part of that kind of from the beginning. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how has it shifted over time? And where do you think it's going? And then after that, I'd love to dive a little deeper into, some of your strategies, your specific thoughts around different marketing channels, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, dude. So just for context for the listeners, our marketing budget monthly is hovering right around $55,000. The bulk of that is invested into direct mail. So we spend about $35,000 a month on direct mail. And then the variance there, that 20 grand, is distributed across some other things: pay-per-click, pay-per-lead, SEO. We do some stuff to generate referrals because we do really well with referrals and relationships in our market. So we incentivize and allocate some of that budget towards that. Plus, we're still doing some outbound, like cold calling that's farmed out to other companies and things like that. So that's kind of what our spend is. We're doing 9 or 10 deals a month in Central California. Our average profit margin per deal is, for us and our company, hovers around $28,000, $29,000 between wholesales and fix and flips. That's just our blended average for profit per deal. So that's a kind of a snapshot of our company. Direct mail is what I cut my teeth in. That's what I've always done the most consistently. It started out with me in 2014, literally handwriting letters to my Driving for Dollars list right on my kitchen table. And then every time I did a deal, I would always earmark some of the revenue that came in from that and reinvest it back into growing, those channels. And so mail for us is number one for sure. That's the thing that I feel like, and you've seen it with pay-per-click. I've seen it with a lot of outbound, which we used to do a ton. Things change and shift very quickly, and things like SMS that used to work really well a few years ago no longer work anymore, and so, we've put our chips on mail because I just feel like we've got more, juice to squeeze out of that than anything else. And then, we strategically do everything. So now we really want to spend more money to generate higher quality inbound leads, supplement that with our outbound stuff, and, really focus on building relationships. And so it comes from kind of, a mix of everything, which is probably, what you see with people that have been doing the business as long as we have. You graduate to those types of things.
Add a little bit of context, like you're saying your specific experience. For your sake, and for anybody listening, I want to kind of start to compare some of those things to other benchmarks. We recently, I don't know if you saw this, we did a benchmark report amongst about 100 investors across the country. We gathered all their data and we kind of sliced and diced it, compared it one to another, and all that stuff. And there's, just based on what you're saying, there's a few things that are kind of matching up a lot. One of those things, we saw the amount of money being spent on outbound channels. It's going way down.
Yeah.
The big four right now are direct mail, TV, PPC, and pay-per-lead.
Yep.
The vast majority of marketing budgets are going to those four marketing channels in the industry. It seems to generally be true for you, with direct mail being your like primary. And it seems like different investors have like a different primary channel, depending on kind of like what you've been able to dial in, what's working well in your market. But direct mail is is definitely seems to be doing well for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
it leans into our strengths because I was always, even though I'm not like super data driven person, like we keep KPIs of everything now and we measure everything. Like I was always just I took to going and finding and scrubbing some of these niche lists where we would go pull things directly from the county, and I just took a lot of pride and effort in that at the beginning, and then as the team grow, we scaled that, and then we eventually moved to like 80/20 and like a lot of these companies where we buy big data sets. And then now we market that along with some of our other, high performing lists. And TV is one of the things that we have not done in our market for just different reasons. I definitely think that would be something that we would look closely at in 2026, but more so through, I've heard it referred to different things, but mainly through the streamers first and not necessarily broadcast, just because I like the way that, at least it's been explained to me, that they can kind of target, the avatar of the person that we want. And I don't watch, like, the only time I watch broadcast TV is when I'm watching sports, and that's it. You know what I mean? And so, like, I like the idea when you're on like Hulu or something like that, you have to watch those ads when you go through if you're not paying for the ad-free version. So I think we would dabble a little bit in that. But again, mail is the thing that has just been tried and true for us. We've got it down. And it's easy to scale. We've got, between all of the different counties that we're marketing to, 5-6 million properties that we can do. So we're not even we're not even scratching the surface of like what could be possible. So I think we, strategically can grow mail. Our sales team is built to, handle those inbound inquiries as they come in. We've got a pretty good sales process that we've built and refined over the years that I'm proud of. And so I think it's just throwing more gas on the fires that, have proven to work for us well over the years.
yeah, I mean, 100%. I can tell you based on the survey results, which in a lot of ways confirm some things that I've anecdotally known to be true for a while. Different marketing channels kind of have different pieces of what's really valuable. What made direct mail really valuable was the volume it could drive in not a massive market. Because with PPC, for example, obviously PPC and SEO and social ads are kind of what we do as a company. So PPC and SEO are at the top of that list. And the cool thing about those channels is they can be really efficient. They can get you really high quality leads. And the thing that kind of sucks is you just cannot scale it a ton in a smaller market. Direct mail is a little bit different. And PPC, can it be scaled a ton? Absolutely. You just need a bigger market, or you need multiple markets in order to do it. Right. So we saw direct mail kind of performing. If you compare direct mail to PPC, what we saw is PPC generates a better lead quality on average than direct mail does at a similar return on investment to what direct mail does. But the total volume available to direct mail is higher than it was with PPC. So PPC has the advantage of
Yeah.
lead quality. Direct mail has the advantage of a little more scalability. The reason they're top channels is both of them are pretty scalable. But yeah, you can push it further in mail for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things it's been an interesting ride for me the last couple years. Like I'd say 3 years ago, our like operating costs on a monthly basis to run our business was $35,000. It was me, a very small team. I was still wearing a lot of hats in the business. And then, now our average total spend fluctuates between, I'd say, 110 to 120,000 with marketing and payroll, and then all the other expenses that come along with running the business. And so because of my sales and marketing background, I've always made the biggest line item on our P&L is always our marketing costs, right? But we're at the point now where my initiative to the team is like, look, dude, I've spent all the money. There's no more money coming. So now you guys have to figure out how to make this work. We're not like ratcheting up the marketing budget anymore. We've, essentially tripled or quadrupled where we were from a few years ago to now. So now it's like, how do we continue to like optimize and make things work, find areas of inefficiencies. And that's where, we're going to get better, because it's, there's no more money coming in 2026, at least for me, so we're here and this is the benchmark. And that's a cool and interesting challenge too, as a business owner. I think a lot of times when you start out as a solopreneur, you just look at the top line number and you're like, okay, deals are closing and we're good. And you really have to mature to the point where you're looking at really the bottom line, most importantly. And every month we go through an exercise of just line by line, is this something that we absolutely need, or, can we, make it more efficient some way, somehow, And so, yeah, it's definitely been, especially again, in the market that we're in, it's definitely been a balancing act trying to figure out how to do all of that properly.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts based on what you said. First, let's talk benchmarks again.
Yeah.
Based on our survey, the average flipper spending about 20% of their revenue on marketing.
Yep.
However, the average wholesaler was spending closer to 40% of their revenue on marketing. Sort of makes sense considering you're probably going to make a lot more money from flips and wholesales. Also, flippers tend to close leads a little bit worse than wholesalers do.
Yep.
So you layer those things together that maybe you're making like 2.5x the spread, but then also, you're a little bit worse at closing. Maybe you go from 40 to 20%. What's interesting is you're at about, so if you're making, you said you're making how much per deal? 27, 28 grand?
Yeah, 28 and some change right now, the last time I looked at the number.
Okay. So you're actually a little in 5 grand cost per deal. So that means that you must be like a little less than that 20%. Yet you have a blend between flips and wholesale. I guess what I'm doing is I'm validating the fact that like your business from an efficiency standpoint is actually outperforming the industry at least a little bit. But the interesting thing to note here is that 5 grand per deal, because I can tell you for every guy out there that's like you, there's another guy who's running a marketing channel, possibly with Bateman Collective, because I know these people, and they're not 5 grand per deal. They're more like maybe 7 grand per deal in a market like yours, because there's a few deals that you're able to close that they just weren't able to close because they don't have the sales process quite as dialed in, right? But they're not like 28 grand spreads. They're more like 15 because they haven't quite figured out the back end, right? And you look at those couple little things that happen with like a mature business like Jason's compared to a business that hasn't quite figured out all that stuff as much. And now they're paying 7 grand for deals that they make 15 grand on. And Jason's over here with the same leads and have a fantastic business, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting because a lot of people, what I guess what I'm getting at partially here is I think a lot of beginners assume that the people who are really seasoned in the space, it must be because they have some way to get their cost per deal way lower. So they're getting way more deals for the amount of money that they're spending. Usually what I see actually is that the bigger investors, they don't actually have a significantly lower cost per deal. Often in many cases it's higher. And they just make more per deal. Yeah. And they're just doing it at scale. And those are the things that really make a difference. Which
and
for a lot of people seems to be
only
unexpected.
comes, in my experience, that only comes with time in the seat. You know what I mean? Like I don't know of a way to shortcut that, like it really does take the years in the seat, failing forward constantly, iterating, sitting back, reviewing. And we do, postmortems on every single deal. And it's like, what worked, what didn't work? How do we be better? How do we, we look at every single time money's going in or money going out, and how do we save a little bit on every single one? When we negotiate and we sign the contract, can we save on title and escrow? Can we save with our contractor? Can we save on our holding costs? Can we save on the cost of borrowing money? And it's all of those little things combined that help drive the profitability. And you at first have to be looking at the numbers, which I wasn't great at, frankly. And I'll be the first one to admit, you know what I mean? Like I was like, dude, like we crushed this deal. We made 40, 50 grand, but you don't really know the actual true cost because you're not in the weeds really measuring all this stuff. And then when you get in there and measure it, it's kind of this light bulb moment that goes off and it's like, damn, dude, I didn't have the business that I thought that I did. And a lot of times people will revert back to like, all right, I'm not going to spend the money on the team. I'm not going to spend the money on the marketing. I'm going to come back and be kind of that solopreneur or small team where I'm wearing all the hats because that can be maybe more profitable, but that's not the business that I wanted. I didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day of the home buying things. I always had the vision to do larger deals, like some of the land stuff that we've talked about. And in order for me to focus and have the energy and the bandwidth to do that, I can't be in the weeds every single day with our home buying business. You know what I mean? And so this 2-3 year kind of trajectory that we've been on, really this maturation process, you can't fake that, man. And that's what I tell my team all the time. It's like, you have to spend the time. There's no other way to do it. There is no shortcut. Like even with coaching and all the things, like we have Sharper and all the things that everybody does, like you still have to have the time where you've gone through and refined and optimized. And that just, you just can't skip that part, And so I think once you get to the other side of that, it gives you a sense of confidence that you really know and understand what's going on in your business that, I never had, without going through this process, man. So it's definitely learned a ton going through and doing this.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point that you can literally check every box. Like, oh, we hired Sharper. Oh, we hired Bateman Collective. Oh, we put the marketing budget up, and you can still fail.
Yeah,
after you check every box.
Yeah, because you got to execute, dude. You got to go execute all that stuff. Like you can have, here's the roadmap, here's the blueprint, but without actually implementing it, and having constant repetition and iteration and finding like creating feedback loops and everything, like you're never going to improve. So it really,
Yeah.
like writing the check is the easy part, like doing the work and like doing what they tell you to do, that's the hard part. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's at risk of this being a little bit of a tangent, because I want to double down on some of those marketing concepts. One thing that you mentioned, I think, is really interesting. I've heard kind of conflicting opinions on this.
Yeah.
And it's just a process of like, look, you're a guy who's showing up to this podcast with over $100,000 in overhead. And I get it. I've got like probably 350, 400. And I can tell you, I sleep like a baby at night.
Yeah.
People think I shouldn't be able to sleep like a baby at night. I sleep like a baby at night.
Yep.
And I'm comfortable with it. And it's the business I want to build. And I'm doing it intentionally. And I feel like I understand it on a high level. And some people get really scared of that. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe it comes, I think for a lot of people, it genuinely comes to the point where you like try to scale. And as you try to scale, you start to like need the expenses of a larger business, yet you have the revenue of a smaller business, right? And it takes a lot of cash, and then people usually like hustle really hard for a period of time, and then they scale back, they fire their team. And goodness, it seems like most investors have like fired their entire team like multiple times.
Yeah.
It's so common in this industry. And I think part of that comes down to the fact it's a volatile industry in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But just pretend for a moment that I'm an investor, and I have like basically my business is the equivalent of a really high paying job. I've got this dialed down. I'm closing leads at a good rate. I'm making lots of money, and I'm considering, oh, should I go down this path that Jason went down, where I'm going to take on this 6 figures in monthly overhead, and I'm going to build this larger business with more people in it. Being completely honest, you can add a different opinion to this mix if you'd like. I can tell you what I've generally seen is, if you're that person trying to start going through that process and you want to end up like someone else, you're probably going to make less money for a period of time, right?
1,000,000%. You have to mentally get ready, because there is going to be an acclimation period that it's like equating it to climbing like Mount Everest or something. Like as you get higher on your ascent, you have to acclimate to what is required as you're going higher. And so, the elevation goes up, like less oxygen, you're not going to be able to breathe, and you need some time to let your financial lungs kind of catch up, right? So there is absolutely a method that needs to be followed, because you can do that too quickly and get really reckless, and your business is not mature enough where it can sustain kind of the ups and downs and the swings that are going on. And it can be lights out really quick, dude. You have 3 or 4 bad months in a row and it's game over, man. And so I think you have to do it strategically. I think one of the things that helped me, beyond just doing it at a measured pace and not like comparing myself to other people and trying to catch up to other people, and just doing it at a pace that worked for me, a couple different things that I would add. One, you're going to have to learn how to get like emotionally detached from the value of money. Like the way that I used to think about money, like when I first got into the business, to the way that it is now, it's just numbers on a spreadsheet to me. There is no like 100,000 versus a million or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. They're just numbers. They aren't like, there is no more emotional value for me. And I think for whatever reason, that when I learned to detach from that, it allowed me to deal with that ascent a little bit easier. It's not like, oh my God, dude, like, like all of this money, we got to write this humongous check. And so I think those two things together, along with, I've always found, and when I started in the business, I literally just did YouTube University podcasts. I didn't have money to pay for coaching, so I figured it out on my own. And so I think the other thing that helped me was I got to a space where I really did value the speed that you get from paying for somebody that's proven to kind of show you how to do all of this stuff with a proven blueprint and a proven method. I can follow instructions really well. So if I go to somebody that I trust, like my coach from Sharper, Brandon, and Brandon says, do this, dude, this is what you need to do, I just do it. And I don't like question the recipe for success. You know what I mean? Same thing as like if I were going to go out and do PPC, I could maybe learn it on my own by watching it, or I could just come to you guys and just pay for somebody that's already done it, that's iterated multiple times, that's already navigated kind of all these pitfalls. And I think you have to be okay with doing that. Like just because you started at the beginning and you just kind of figured it out on your own, like this is not something, in my opinion, that makes sense to try to figure out on your own, especially if you've never worked in an environment where you've hired people, you've grown a team, you've trained people, you know what I mean? And so I actually don't think it is like the optimal decision for most people that find success in that kind of like hustler season where they just grind and they work really hard. Like you can make 5, 6, 700 grand, maybe a little bit more, have a really small team, 1 or 2 VAs, 1, 2 people that work for you. You're going to be working every single day, but you're not going to be stressed the hell out because you're not going to deal with all the challenges of what it is to grow the team. But if you are going to make that transition, I think those 3 things are big things. Go at a measured pace so you're not reckless and you don't just scale too quickly. Hire somebody that can walk you through this, that's got a proven model and a blueprint that you can follow and commit to following it. And then get emotionally detached from the value of money and just understand that your business requires money. And this is just literally numbers. Your P&L are just numbers on a spreadsheet every single day. There's not an emotional attachment to it, and I think those 3 things have worked really well for me and allowed me to navigate this period that we've gone through over the last few years and kind of, you're never out on the other end completely, but get closer to the light at the end of the tunnel without, losing everything, man. So that's been my journey.
Yeah, so much wisdom in what you said there, and advice for me too, in terms of not being emotionally attached to money. Like for example, I like messed up on my taxes the other day. I just got a big old bill from the IRS. It's really frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I hate paying interest. I hate paying penalties. You know what? That's like, if you're always feeling like that, it feels like after your company scaled a little bit, there's another thing that's like that.
Yep.
Like every other day.
Dude, it never ends. It literally never ends. I've had people steal from me. I've had tax issues. Everything that you can think of, I have dealt with it. Lost money on deals, partners go AWOL on, just everything under the sun. And you get to the point, again, this is something that you can't fake as a business owner. When you've been through the ringer so many times, you're like weathered and grizzled in a way that only a person that has dealt with those challenges, overcome those challenges, come out the other end. Like you've already overcome so much that when like another problem comes up, it's like, dude, we've been here before. We've already figured out, this. And even if I don't know exactly how to navigate this, we've dealt with similar types of issues. So you don't have the emotional roller coaster that puts you in a bad position where you make really rash decisions. You can approach these kind of problems, even big, significant ones. You know what I mean? Where it's like, all right, we're not going to get too high or we're going to get too low. We're going to settle down. We're going to figure out the best way to approach this problem. And we're going to get through just like we've done everything else. You know what I mean? And I've dealt with so many things that I thought like, well, dude, this is it. Like this, it's over. It's over for me now. You know what I mean? And like business is done. Like this is going to be what it does. And you just push through. And now I look at problems. I said it before earlier, like learning this from studying other really high level entrepreneurs and founders. It's like they look at problems as opportunities to improve their business. You know what I'm saying? They don't look at it like, oh, I took this loss and now it's this thing. It's like, all right, we took this on the chin, but now how do we not do this again and become a better company at the same time? And I think it's all perspective has so much to do with it, man. And you have to really take kind of a stoic approach to this type of business, because if you are too emotionally attached to everything, like you're going to end up curled under your desk in a ball somewhere, dude, because it's just, there's too many things that are outside of your control that, when you're living at the effect of everything that happens in your life and your business, it's not a good place to be emotionally. That's been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, as you described successful entrepreneurs, I couldn't help but think that describes me 10% of the time. 90% no. And when I look back on like, what are the things that really made the difference in the business? It's when I was acting in that mindset, like the 10% of the time, not when I was acting in like the scarcity, the scare,
flying off the
mindset.
handle. Yeah. Like tense. Cause that just rips out to your team. Your team picks up on that energy transfer like that. So especially if now they don't see the leader of the company with a steady hand on the wheel, especially as like we're navigating choppy waters, then they're going to take their cue from you and then they're going to start fucking freaking out, dude. So it's like, you have to lead by example in these types of situations, man. And it's again, like I have come towards and closer towards like stoic practices, like especially more recently in the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've really studied, and it's just really helped me, like you said, sleep soundly at night and knowing and understanding, like me being able to not be attached emotionally to the outcome of what happens. And as long as I do my best and I'm really good at the process, I can live with whatever outcome is going to happen. whether it breaks my way or it doesn't, I'm not going to feel good or bad. It's just learning that the process is the way, you know what I mean? And really making, I was listening to a pod the other day where they were interviewing a hedge fund manager, and he said, our system is the star. And for whatever reason that did it. It's like nobody here is the star. It's not one person. It's the system that we built. And that's kind of what I'm really trying to do. It's just like, how do we build something where the system is the star and we can, not just change employees in and out like that, but like not have it be so tied to one choke point, neither me as the owner or one or two really like rock star employees, because then you've got a single point of failure in your company. And God forbid something happens, like things it can feel like you're doing great, and it can get a 180 really quickly in those type of situations. So you've got to constantly be figuring out and solving for those types of problems.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes a ton of sense. I think another thing that I keep on thinking in this conversation of all these things that I heard for the longest time, but they only really made sense like after I felt like I had like learned a lesson.
Yeah.
Another one of those is that you always hear like a business can't outgrow the founder of that business or the leader of that business, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But it wasn't until I was actually like the leader of that business and very clearly the constraint on the business, and then like finally got out of that, that it really made sense to me that was true. And I guess the way I've kind of thought about it, the reason I think a lot of people are a little afraid of scale is because anytime you're trying to bring your business to a point that is further than your own personal ability to lead that business, for you, it's almost a little bit different, right? Because based on your experience in corporate America, you've already sort of led a business through a similar stage to what you're trying to get the business to right now,
Yep.
right? So you
Yep.
you probably went through in your career at some point this time where you got a team, and then after getting that team and growing that team, you're like, Dan, life is so much worse with this team than it was without it. I was a good performer. I could control things. I didn't have to rely on these idiots surrounding me to make things. Like most leaders kind of go through like that phase, and then eventually
Yep.
they get to the point where they're like actually a good leader, and they learn how to like lift other people around them, and really believe in those people, and found better people, and retain the best people. All of those things that make that possible. But
It's the talent, dude. It's the talent. And that's
yeah,
the thing that I'm really focusing on now. And I think where a lot of real estate investors who are doing this kind of scaling trajectory that get it wrong, myself included, is they don't do a good job of attracting and recruiting top level talent. And they definitely don't do a good job of compensating that talent when they find them. So they find themselves constantly turning over in really important positions because they don't have the system, they don't have the training, and they don't have the comp right. You know what I mean? And so when those three things are off, you're constantly finding people that will come in, and you're just it's just turnover all the time, man. And so I feel like one of the things that I've done really well is we've just done a good job of attracting, recruiting, and developing that talent. And I think I've had some key members that have worked for me, 7, 8 years. The guy that's my right hand has been with me for that long. The COO has been with me 6 years. You know what I mean? And so it's just, I've known them, and you can't, like when you're in a foxhole, you know what I mean, with somebody that long, when you see how they react and respond under pressure to these types of situations, this bond that you build is really important. And to go back to like what you were saying, I've had to take short money as a business owner to properly compensate some of those people. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, for me, I could, in theory, be more profitable, or I could do larger owner distributions or these other things to me, but you have to forego that in the short term to build the things out for the betterment of the long-term vision, right? If my long-term vision is to grow the land development company that can far surpass what we can do from fixing and flipping and wholesaling homes, right? I've got to have like people at the very top that I can trust to make really important decisions. You know what I mean? And all of those people, they have to be trained, they have to be compensated, they have to be managed. And it's like, it just doesn't happen by, saying you want to scale and then hiring a coach. Like you really have to spend time doing all this stuff, man. There's no way to fake any of that.
well, it's kind of a catch-22 a little bit,
Yeah.
because what you described about like that cycle of like hiring and then firing, and I can tell you, how many years ago was this? I went through basically like when I started to scale the company, needed to hire people to make that happen. Well, the first mistake I made is I always hired too slow.
Yes.
And so I, I'm just like, because the solution at the beginning is always like, oh, I'll just like work more hours and do that.
Mhm.
And then I get to a point where it's like, well, other than the hours I'm sleeping, there are no more hours to work.
There's no more time. There's
So
no more bandwidth. That's it.
you fix the problem that way.
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, I need to hire people. But when you're hiring people and you're already in that space, it's like, well, now I don't have any time to recruit those people. And then now once I get those people, I don't actually have time to train them properly. So what happens is I brought on like subpar people and then also train them poorly.
Yeah.
And but then the situation you get in is, well, now I'm so busy cleaning up all the messes from these people that I don't have time to recruit different people. So I had a lot of people who like sit in that like C or D player like situation that
Yep.
just stayed in the company far too
Yep.
long.
Yep.
Because having a human in the seat is better than having nobody in the seat, have anybody to replace them with. And I was stuck in that loop for a really, really long time. And it's so hard because you need good people. And also, here's the other thing is those good people don't want to work at a company that's turning over people really fast
Yep.
and has the wrong people. So it's like you kind of have to fix everything all at once.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It was
And you need to
grind for
cast a
years.
vision that they can see their growth with them, because if they're constantly out in front of the owner and their
Mhm.
dreams are bigger than the owner's dreams, then they're not going to stay around either, dude. So it's like you're signing up to go through a freaking meat grinder, dude. If you're going down this thing, like you just have to be ready to run the gauntlet, man. And that's what it is, dude. And so it's just like only a certain type of person I feel like is wired to deal
Yeah.
with the pain. Like your pain tolerance has to be like, you have to kind of just have a new relationship with pain and discomfort, man. That's the other thing. It's like you learn that you disattach from the value of money, and you have to learn like, you almost have to be kind of a like just it's masochistic in a way where it's like I love being in an environment where I'm constantly uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Because I've learned that all the growth and the positive things that I want only happen when I'm in that space. Now there's a sweet spot where if you start going too far, you're starting to become reckless and you're making bad business decisions and the wheels can come off. And then there's also a spot where it's like it's too comfortable and you're in your comfort zone. So you have to kind of find where you get out of that without being too crazy and like stay in that zone for as long as you can. But that requires you every day. Like you shouldn't be putting fires out every day, but it's always like you're always solving for some type of problem, man. You know, it's like there's something that's going on. And if you just want to coast and like enjoy your life and enjoy kind of the fruits of your labor and just kind of, go on autopilot, like growing a team and building and scaling is not going to be something that you want to do. Just stay in that, like, so like, I think a lot of people just, it's not for me because of the vision that I want to have, but I do think it's for most people. It's like that one person that wears a lot of hats, that has a small team around them. Like you can operate in that space and do very, very well. You know what I mean? And I think like you really have to know what you're signing up for when you decide that you want to make a leap and grow the team out, because those are two really different things and they require different skill sets, like what you were talking about, man. Like, let me just work more hours. Like, I know very few people that are willing to work more than me for as long as I have, dude. Like I still come in and I work a crazy amount of hours 11, 12 years later, but I like genuinely love this shit, dude. So for me, like it doesn't feel like work, at least the way that work used to feel like when I was in my cubicle in corporate America. You know what I mean? And so it just, you have to really understand what you're signing up for if you're wanting to make that transition, because I think a lot of people scale and they just don't know what's really in store for them when they do all this thing. And like you said, they do it the wrong way. And you just, you just need to be prepared for what you're signing up for.
Yeah. I mean, it's also dependent on the phase. Cause I can tell you right now, I work less than I have for like ever since I started working.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to always have like, could I accomplish more if I worked more? I could, right? So if you want freedom and yet you also want control, and yet you also want ambition and growth, you sort of like, if you want more of one of those things, you sort of have to give up a little bit of the other things
That's
to make
absolutely
that
right.
possible. Right?
Absolutely.
Like my company could be growing faster if I was working as many hours as you are. I could probably grow even faster. But there's also some like blessing that comes on the other side of a little bit of scale, where at some point I'm like, you know what, I could work twice as many hours and then our output as a company would increase by like 1%.
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's just enough other people, enough other high level people, enough people around that are better at what they do than I would be at what they do, that my hours don't make as much of a difference. I don't feel like I actually reached that point until I had maybe 30 team members, but I feel like I could
Yeah.
have done it sooner if I knew what I was doing. Like, could
Exactly.
I?
No,
Yeah,
it really just depends on the person and what drives the person.
yeah,
Like I'm so focused right now for whatever reason. I think God's planted a seed in me to do some of these bigger projects. Like I can remember just driving by a bare piece of dirt and seeing 300 apartments come out of the ground or this huge development come out of the ground and just always thinking like, man, dude, like I've always wanted to figure out how to do that. And I'm in a season right now where we're doing some really aggressive growth with our land company, dude. And we are, like I said, we're selling a lot of the assets that we have and we're pushing a lot of chips in the middle to do this. So this season of my life right now requires me to work like crazy hours because I just have a vision over the next 10 years to do something really big and special. And I figure like, listen, we have one shot here. Like I'm going to swing for the fences and see what happens. You know what I mean? And then we're going to go from there because I'm just wired that way. And that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? And so I think people
yeah.
need to really have clarity of vision. And I think when you're lacking clarity of what's important, then that's when you end up starting like you compare yourself to somebody else and you're like, well, maybe I should do this where you're not even really happy doing that stuff. So why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You're doing it because you see other people in your mastermind or in social media doing it. So you think it's the right thing to do instead of looking internally and just saying like, maybe this is a season now where I want to spend some more time with my kids. You know, I've done all the hard work of building a team of 30 people. And now like, I don't want to do that. And that's going to be what this is right now. You know what I mean? But like, I'm in a space where
Yeah.
I'm 44, going to be 45. My kids are older. You know what I mean? We've been empty nesters for like 5 years. Like we've done all of that, you know? So like now it's like, I want to work like really, really hard. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where
That's
we're
your
at. And
vision.
everybody just needs to figure out what's right for them.
Well, how many hours do you work in the wholesale business,
I would
excluding
say,
the land?
yeah, like right now, and I'm pretty meticulous with how we manage and track and account for my time, like as far as like time blocking and my schedule, everything is accounted for from when I wake up till when we wind down. I would say right now it's probably pretty close to 50-50, where like the first half of my day we're spent doing the things, not necessarily me in the weeds driving the business, but it's guiding the leadership team to make sure that they have the things that they need and me supplementing the areas that they don't have, right? And then the back half of my day, what I really am great at and what I've been proven to be good at, it's big relationships, right? Casting a big vision, raising capital. And those are the things that I really need in order to grow the land company. So I'm meeting with national builders, I'm meeting with our engineering team, the surveyors, I'm
Mhm.
meeting with people to raise capital and having discussions about how we fund some of these larger projects that we're doing, right? And so, you know, that works really well for me because the main thing has to be the main thing right now because we need to have the bills paid for me to get to this 5-year mark where the land company takes off because like we're doing one deal in Bakersfield where we're delivering 249 finished lots to a national builder, but that's got a 4-year life cycle. You know what I mean? And I have millions of dollars of my own money out like right now. You know what I'm saying? Just getting ready to do that. And we're not going to see any money from the first phase of lots that we sell for at least another 12 to 18 months. You know what I'm saying? So to have to balance, like, even though it's a real estate business, it's a completely different business model with completely different cash conversion cycles, completely different risk profile. Everything is different. Like, you know, you got to spend a lot of time learning this business. And every time I've tried to shift to something, and I kind of take like a hands-off approach, I always lose money. So I knew when I was going to do this, I was like, I have to be all in. This isn't going to be some kind of set it, forget it thing where I rely on partners and other people to do it. Like I have to become a master at the land development thing, the same way that I've put my 10,000 hours in the wholesaling and home buying business. Like we had to put those 10,000 hours into the land development company. That's the only way that this would work. And there's too much risk for us. Like it would be the wrong thing for me to do to take all of the assets that we've done, commit to selling half of them to not be committed that way. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, you have to be all in right now. This is a season that requires that, right? Like 10
Yeah.
years from now or 15 years from now, I don't want to be working, I definitely don't want to be flipping houses the way that we're doing. And I don't want to be working 10, 12-hour days like the way that I'm doing now, but it's a means to an end, man. And as
Mhm.
long as I feel like it doesn't feel like work. That's for whatever reason, that's kind of the lens that I view this through. Like, as long as I feel like I'm building something special, I'm passionate, I wake up every day and I'm fully charged up, then I'm good with it, dude. As soon as it stops feeling like that, like we were talking about coaching in the education business prior to this, that started to feel like work for me after 3 years, dude. You know what I mean? And like, even though it was financially viable and profitable, and I got a lot of personal fulfillment out of seeing our coaching community and students do well, it started to feel like work. And so as soon as that does, it's like, I didn't do this to feel like I have a job, dude. You know what I mean? And so I've got to be doing something that is aligned with the things that are important to me.
Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. Because if you think about it, really what you've done is you've scaled the wholesale and fix and flip company. You scaled it enough that the requirement of your time in that business is significantly lower. And at the same time, you've chosen to double down on a different path that you feel is going to be better for you in 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that you can even
Think about 10 years down
think
the
about
road.
doing that.
Yeah.
Well, not so one, like, yeah, if you're in the grind, you're not thinking about 10 years, you're thinking about tomorrow. Right. So I know you're not in the grind because of that. And the other thing is the fact that you're able to invest that time into the land business is evidence of the scaling actually working
Yes.
in the wholesale business. You've just chosen at the same time to try to extend into something different, which is really cool. It's something that's important to you. But what's cool about scaling the business, in my opinion, is the optionality that you have, where like you can do that, right? You could also choose to spend an extra half day doing whatever you want to do with your half day every day.
Yep.
If you wanted to.
If
right?
I wanted to, it's the freedom of choice, which is so important to me, dude. That there's an unlock that happened for me that I didn't realize it was going to be as significantly impactful as it's been, where I really got to a space. I don't know how long into the journey, but you know, I was really fully in charge of who I spent my time with and how I spent my day. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like I had to be here at this place surrounded by people that some of them I didn't like or respect, and I had to work with them because I needed money. You know what I mean? In order to pay for my mortgage and my lifestyle. As soon as I got to a space where we achieved some semblance of financial freedom, like it just unlocks this life that it feels like this is the way that life was supposed to be lived, dude. You know what I mean? And like, that's a feeling that I wish I could just bottle that up and share that with so many people. And it only comes with the point where you have a certain amount of financial independence in your business, and your investments and things have to perform at a certain point. But it really does feel amazing, dude. And so now I get to choose, because you said it, like I could literally after lunch, like, you know, like the time that I'm investing into the land, I could go home and hang out and chill. I don't need to put in those extra hours and those long nights, but it's by choice. And that's a really important distinction. I think when you get to choose what you do with your time and who you spend it with, it's really a really cool feeling.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Jason, thank you for coming on here, sharing so much wisdom. For anybody who's interested in connecting with you one way or another, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
The easiest way is on Instagram and Facebook. That's where I'm most active. It's Jason Pritchard at both platforms. So if you just pull my name in there, we're very, very active on social. I like to really share the good, the bad, the wins, the ups and downs of my journey. And I'm happy to be a resource to anybody that listens to this pod that has questions. Feel free to reach out to me. If you've got a question and I can be a resource to you, I'm happy to do it if I can.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate your time. And for everybody else listening, I will see you next week.
Thanks, Brandon.